January 2024. Ashley, 40, and her husband Mark, 40, had been living together for nearly 22 years. On the surface, their family seemed peaceful, and their lives appeared to be as perfect as anyone could imagine. They had 2 children growing up in a large family home that Ashley had inherited from her parents. Mark owned a successful HVAC business that he had built from the ground up with Ashley's support. To the outside world, their life was an ideal example of family success. Ashley always believed her family was perfect. Her husband was caring, her children were doing well in school, and she devoted her life to her home and family. She maintained a close relationship with her parents, especially her mother, Evelyn, a 60-year-old woman who held a prominent position at their local church as a children's pastor. Evelyn was known for her wisdom and respectability. However, beneath this facade, Ashley began to notice strange changes in Mark's behavior. He increasingly declined family dinners, blaming work stress. More often than not, he locked himself in his office in the evenings, claiming he had to focus on important projects. When Ashley asked about it, Mark would respond irritably and become more distant. February 2024. Ashley began noticing something even more peculiar. Her mother, who used to visit only briefly, was now spending entire days at their home, sometimes without any prior notice. Despite being close with her mother, this unsettled Ashley. At first, she chalked it up to her mother wanting to care for her and the kids, but her intuition told her something was wrong. December 31st, 2024. Ashley returned home earlier than expected from a girls' trip with her friends. Feeling tired and slightly uncomfortable, being 7 months pregnant, she longed for the comfort of her own bed. The desire to be home outweighed her plans to continue her trip, so she decided to return a day early. Her arrival set off a chain of events that would unravel her world in ways she could never have predicted. When Ashley opened the front door, she sensed a strange tension in the air. The house was unusually quiet. The kids were at a relative's house, and she expected to find her husband at home. Walking through the hallway, she headed toward the bedroom. When she opened the door, her world collapsed. She found Mark and her mother, Evelyn, in a compromising situation in her own bed. Ashley froze, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. Her mother, hastily wrapping herself in a bedsheet, screamed at her to get out of their bedroom. The coldness and authority in Evelyn's voice shook Ashley to her core. It felt as though everything around her had become unreal, as if this wasn't her home, her family. Ashley stood there in shock, unable to believe her eyes or ears. She quickly ran out of the room, trying to process what she had just witnessed. At the same time, her eldest daughter, who had been home preparing for a party, ran out of her room after hearing the commotion. She also caught a glimpse of her grandmother, half-dressed, running out through the back door. Devastated and overwhelmed, her daughter ran to her aunt's house to share what had happened, not waiting for Ashley to explain. January 1st, 2025. The next morning, Ashley decided to confront her husband. At first, she was in such shock that she couldn't find the words to ask the right questions. Mark looked dejected and confused. When Ashley asked him how long this had been going on, he admitted that the affair with her mother had started when they were both just 18, back when they first moved in with her parents after getting married. This confession hit Ashley even harder. It turned out that Mark's affair with her mother had lasted the entire 22 years of their marriage. Moreover, Mark confessed that Evelyn had seduced him, and their relationship had started when the young couple was just beginning their life together. Ashley realized that her mother hadn't just destroyed her marriage, but had been doing so for the entirety of her adult life. Ashley felt her whole world crumble around her. She sat there, stunned, realizing that the years she had considered the best of her life had been built on betrayal. January 5th, 2025. Ashley was in a state of deep emotional shock after learning the truth about the long-standing affair between her husband and her mother. Her entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. She felt like she had not only lost her family, but also her trust in the people she loved the most. But even in her grief and confusion, Ashley knew that she had to take action. She called her father and asked him to come to her home. She knew she couldn't keep this terrible secret any longer. It was important to her that her father knew the truth, even if it would break his heart. Ashley also realized that the future of their family hinged on this conversation. January 6, 2025. Ashley's father, Richard, arrived at her house with a sense of dread. He didn't know what was happening, but he understood that it was something serious. When he entered the house, Ashley asked him to sit down and began the conversation. Slowly, but with determination, she told him the entire story about the affair that had lasted for decades. Richard sat in silence, his face pale and expressionless. He couldn't believe that his wife, with whom he had spent nearly 43 years, was capable of such betrayal. Ashley called Mark into the living room and demanded that he confess everything in front of her father. Under pressure, Mark didn't deny it. He confirmed that the affair had started when he and Ashley first got married and moved in with her parents. This was the most painful revelation for Richard, to realize that his wife had been living a double life all these years, right under his own roof. January 10, 2025. After this heartbreaking meeting, Ashley realized that this was just the tip of the iceberg. She began piecing together events that had once seemed insignificant but now took on new meaning. Her younger brothers, the twins, and her youngest brother always looked a little different from the other children in the family. They bore more physical resemblance to Mark than to anyone else in the family. Ashley asked herself the agonizing question, could her brothers be Mark's children? Ashley approached her father with a request to have DNA tests done to find out if Mark was the biological father of her brothers. Despite his pain, Richard agreed. He understood that without answers to these questions, they wouldn't be able to move forward. The entire family was left in a state of suspense as they awaited the results, but the tension grew with each passing day. January 15, 2025. While waiting for the DNA results, the tension in the family reached a breaking point. Evelyn was forced to leave the family home and move in with one of her daughters, who had taken her side. The atmosphere in Ashley's home was thick with anger and betrayal. Even the children, unaware of the full details, could sense that something was very wrong. Despite Evelyn's attempts to reconcile, she continued to downplay the severity of her actions. She called Ashley, offering excuses and trying to shift the blame onto Mark. She claimed that her betrayal was just a mistake driven by emotional weakness, but Ashley knew that this was more than a mistake. It was a decades-long betrayal that had no justification. January 20th, 2025. On this day, the DNA test results came back, confirming Ashley and her father's worst fears. The twins were, in fact, Mark's children. Ashley felt the last pieces of her world fall apart. Her family was now bound not only by marriage, but also by blood to the man who had shattered her trust. Realizing the full extent of his mistakes, Mark began begging for Ashley's forgiveness. He claimed that the affair with her mother had been the biggest mistake of his life and that he regretted every day spent living a lie. But Ashley couldn't forgive him, knowing that both her mother and her husband had destroyed her life and the lives of their children. January 25th, 2025. Ashley called a family meeting, inviting all her siblings. She wanted everyone to know the truth and decide for themselves how to deal with the situation. Around the table sat her father, brothers, sisters, and her grown children. Ashley spoke calmly but firmly about everything that had happened. Her voice trembled, but she held her emotions in check. The reactions were mixed. Some family members were shocked and speechless, while others were filled with rage. The situation quickly escalated when Evelyn tried to justify herself and blame Mark, which sparked anger in Ashley and her sisters, turning the conversation into a full-blown argument. Evelyn attempted to manipulate everyone, claiming that she had fallen victim to her own emotions and that all her actions were driven by love. But to the family, this was nothing more than an attempt to avoid responsibility. January 30th, 2025. After the family meeting, Ashley decided to cut ties with both Mark and her mother for good. She knew she couldn't continue living in a house filled with memories of betrayal. February 1st, 2025. After a difficult conversation with her family, Ashley realized it was time to take the next step, to publicly reveal the truth that had been tearing her apart inside. She decided that she could no longer keep this secret and that everyone involved in their family's life deserved to know what had happened. It was a tough decision, but she knew that silence only supported the lies that had destroyed her life. Ashley organized a family gathering, inviting not only her close relatives but also her husband's family and those especially close to her parents. She knew this move would lead to a huge scandal, but she saw no other way out. That day, Ashley's house was filled with family members, many of whom had no idea about the dark events that had unfolded behind the scenes of this perfect family. February 2nd, 2025. Ashley gathered all the adults in the living room. Her voice trembled as she began to speak. She wasn't sure how people would react to her story, but deep in her heart, she knew the truth had to come out. Slowly and confidently, Ashley told the entire story. How she had caught her mother and husband in the act on New Year's Eve, how she discovered their long-term affair, and how she suspected that her younger brothers were possibly her husband's children. As she spoke, the room fell into dead silence. It seemed like everyone was paralyzed with shock. Some began whispering, while others just sat motionless, unable to believe what they were hearing. Ashley's mother, Evelyn, tried to interrupt her daughter's story, claiming it was all lies and that Ashley was trying to tarnish her name. But Ashley was ready for this. She presented evidence, text messages, photos, and her husband's confessions. The room became heavy with the realization that this terrible scandal was, in fact, true. February 5th, 2025. After the revelation, the family split into two camps. Most of the relatives sided with Ashley, supporting her decision to speak openly about the betrayal. However, some accused Ashley of being too harsh in handling the situation, claiming that this public exposure was tearing the family apart. Some relatives supported Evelyn, believing that Ashley should have kept these family matters private. Her younger siblings were especially shocked to learn that their own father might not be their biological parent. For them, this wasn't just a family crisis, it was a crisis of identity. The twins, realizing that Mark might be their father, were devastated. Their world, as they knew it, collapsed in an instant. One of the brothers couldn't handle the blow and left the gathering, leaving the family in disarray. February 10th, 2025. After the truth came out, deep family conflicts erupted. Some relatives stopped speaking to Ashley, blaming her for ruining her mother's reputation. Ashley's mother, Evelyn, faced the consequences of her actions. Her close friend, who held a prominent position in their local church, learned of the scandal and decided to intervene. Evelyn was removed from her position as the children's pastor, as her behavior was seen as contradictory to the values she was supposed to uphold. This was a heavy blow for Evelyn, as she not only lost her family but also her professional reputation. February 15th, 2025. Ashley's entire family was in crisis. Her father, Richard, was forced to move out of their home, as he could no longer bear staying in a place that held so many painful memories of his wife's betrayal. He insisted on DNA testing for his younger children before making any decisions about a divorce. The wait for the results was agonizing for him. He could no longer trust his wife, but he still hoped that at least his younger children wouldn't be a product of infidelity. Mark, on the other hand, had to move out of the house. He stayed with his parents, who were furious that their son had become involved in such a major scandal. He tried to make amends with Ashley, but realized it was impossible. Soon, it became clear to him that he had lost not only his family but also the business that he and Ashley had built together. February 20th, 2025. The family bonds were shattered forever. The twins and Ashley's younger brother were at the center of genetic testing, which confirmed the worst fears. The twins were indeed Mark's children. This fact completely destroyed the relationship between Ashley and her brothers, who couldn't believe that their father was someone else. Their world collapsed, and they didn't know how to live with this truth. February 25th, 2025. Ashley's mother, Evelyn, was left without a family and without a job. After being dismissed from the church, she could no longer hide the truth from the public. Many of her friends turned their backs on her, realizing that her behavior was incompatible with the role she had played in society. She moved in with one of her daughters, but this life brought her no joy. She could no longer enjoy the respect and recognition she once had. March 1st, 2025. For Ashley, a new chapter in life began. She decided to sell the house, which was filled with memories of betrayal. Her father offered her financial help so she could start over and find a new home where she could find happiness. Ashley began preparing to sell the house and gather documents for the divorce. Mark lost all rights to the house, as the property, inherited from Ashley's grandfather, was not subject to division in the divorce. Mark also lost half of his business, which he had started with Ashley. He was furious that everything he had built was now destroyed. This was a huge blow for him. He realized that his actions had not only led to the breakdown of his marriage, but also to the complete loss of financial stability. Now, he had lost both his family and the future he had planned with Ashley. March 10, 2025. Ashley continued to battle her inner demons. Her health had deteriorated, and she began suffering from ulcers and digestive problems caused by constant stress. She regularly attended therapy sessions and tried to reconnect with her children, who were also going through severe emotional turmoil. Her older children had completely cut ties with their father. They were devastated by the betrayal and couldn't forgive him for what he had done. Ashley tried to explain to her younger children that it was okay to love their father despite everything that had happened, but her 14-year-old daughter refused to see him. Ashley was at a loss, not knowing how to navigate this situation without damaging her daughter's relationship with her father. March 20th, 2025. Ashley received her divorce papers and was now officially a free woman. Her life had been torn apart by betrayal, but she wasn't about to give up. She continued to fight for her happiness and her children's future. April 1st, 2025. Ashley's house was prepared for one final, fateful meeting that would bring an end to the family conflict. On this day, Mark unexpectedly showed up at her door, trying to talk to her and the children. He insisted on seeing them, accusing Ashley of destroying their marriage and family by making their problems public. Mark seemed agitated, and his behavior became more and more unpredictable, making Ashley realize that the situation was spiraling out of control. Ashley couldn't believe that after everything that had happened, Mark was still trying to justify his actions. Her children were in another room, but the noise in the house began to worry them. Ashley tried to calm the situation, but Mark kept blaming her, and his tone grew more threatening. April 5th, 2025. One evening, when Ashley was home alone, Mark returned, this time demanding to speak to the children. Ashley refused, knowing that talking to him could be dangerous. She tried to call the police, but Mark grabbed the phone out of her hand. This time, the conflict reached a breaking point, an altercation that couldn't be avoided. Mark began hurling accusations and then escalated to threats, vowing to destroy everything Ashley had left, her children and her new home. A fierce argument erupted, becoming the culmination of years of repressed anger and betrayal. Ashley struggled to protect herself and her children, realizing that the situation was slipping out of control. April 10th, 2025. Filled with rage and under the influence of alcohol, Mark returned to Ashley's home with a weapon, determined to get his way. He couldn't accept the idea that he had lost not only his family, but also the business and everything he had once considered his own. He blamed Ashley for all his problems, insisting that she had ruined his life. Their latest argument turned into a full-blown tragedy. During another heated exchange, Mark pulled out the weapon, threatening Ashley. She did everything in her power to protect the children and herself, but the situation became uncontrollable. The scene of the drama unfolded in their home, which had once been filled with love and hope for the future, but had now become a stage for destruction. Neighbors, hearing the commotion, called the police, but by the time the officers arrived, it was too late. Mark had taken a tragic action, and the consequences were fatal. The police arrived at the scene only to find a horrific sight. Mark was dead, leaving behind a shattered family and a future that would never be the same again. April 25th, 2025. After the tragedy, Ashley was left alone with her children, her life forever changed. Despite Mark's betrayal and mistakes, his death left a deep scar on her soul. Now, she understood that she had to start over, leaving behind the pain that had haunted her for the past months. Ashley faced new challenges, legal, psychological, and financial. Her children needed support, and she decided to focus on their well-being. Although her life would never be the same, she did everything she could to ensure a stable future for them. She continued her therapy sessions, visited a psychologist, and worked on restoring her health and emotional strength. Her children also received help to cope with what had happened and begin rebuilding their lives after the catastrophe. They stayed together, though,